Greetings, ThauThau. Whenever you're ready, we can start. I don't know if you can hear me. ThauThau, I think you gotta unmute your mic.
Greetings. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Greetings and peace and love. How you
Yeah,
doing?
I'm good. I'm
That's good. Can you hear me clearly?
yes, I can hear you clearly.
Okay, good. So how's your day going so far?
Oh, my day's been busy. I had long online classes with one of my students who's currently in South Korea, but is originally from South Africa. So, with some online classes for about 4 hours. Class. So, yeah. But,
So you was teaching a class, you said?
uh,
You teaching a class?
yes, I teach classes. We have 9 modules that we've developed
Hmm.
for Bantu society, which is African spirituality, African cosmology, African epistemology, African anthology, African philosophy, African culture, African
Oh, okay.
psychology, African calendar.
Okay. Is there a way you could talk a little louder? Because it sounds kind of lowish. I just want to make sure they can hear you well.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it just sounds kind of far away, that's all.
Okay, no, I guess I have to just bring my gadget next to my mouth.
Okay.
So you can hear me clearly now.
Yeah, that's better. Right there was better. It's better. So as you know, I've been following you for some years now on the Facebook, and you really be coming up with some food for thought. You really get deep down into a person's psyche. You kind of like chisel at their subconscious mind to make them open it up. Even if they don't want to, they still have to, they're still getting it, in some kind of way. And especially when you be talking about how, um, within the Rastafari culture, and even outside the Rastafari culture, wherever Black people may be in the diaspora, at home, wherever, they seem to think that religion is going to unify us and bring us together. And at one
Or
point, I can remember at one point that Rasta didn't really start off with religion. It was more like a liberational movement. Do for self, create your own, you know, atmosphere, create your own work, you know. Um, but for some reason, it kind of faded away, and now it's this big religious thing. So we left the church to come into Rastafari, and then still bringing the same Christian attitude into it. And I feel like from a last podcast that I did, the brother that came on was saying that, like even with Shashamani land, Haile Selassie gave 500 acres. How come it's not well established by now? It should be. We agreed that it should be looking like Dubai. It should be looking like a new Wakanda. You know, it should be hospitals there, community centers, health centers, schools, you know, daycare centers, things to do for people that like to get into the arts and the sciences. None of that none of that was never established. And 500 acres is a lot of land for, you know, them to be in the process of losing it or fighting to get it back and fighting to keep it, which is the same mirror image of what happened in Scott's Pass in Jamaica. They were mad at Rita Marley for taking the land back, but you didn't do anything on it for 33 years. So what do you expect her to do? Like,
Um,
there's no progress. So I'll just hail and let you continue.
well, Rastafari carries with it the seed of its own undoing because of this dichotomy of African liberation posture, which include Judeo-Christianity,
Mm-hmm.
or the religious mindset of our erstwhile colonizers and slavers. There are a couple of factors that make development in Chashamani or anywhere you find the Rastafari occupied land. Even in South Africa, here, there are a lot of land that Rasta acquired. I used to frequent Tanzania. All the land you can audit that was given to the Rastafari elders from the days of President Julius Nyerere until now, it amounts to 10,000 acres of land. All of it is undeveloped. I mean, that is big enough to build Wakanda City.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the mindset, the religious mindset is creating competition. It is turning the
Yes.
Rastafari into a competitive affair than cooperative affair. Crab in a barrel mindset. You're trying to prove who's more Rasta than the other, who's more adherent to the Ethiopian Orthodox Church doctrine than the other, who's more versed with the Bible than the other. All of these things are irrelevant, but they are very much the reason why we don't progress. And with Shashamane again, Shashamane is in the midst of the Oromo land. Now, the Oromos were historically and traditionally oppressed by the Solomonic dynasty, which we venerate as divine and as the rationale for His Majesty's divinity. Now you go in the midst of people like that, you raise your Lion of Judah flags, you remind them of centuries of oppression by the Amhara Tigrian ruling class or the Aksumite paradigm of Ethiopia. So that itself is a stumbling block to progress. It's a recipe for them taking your land, which they took a greater part of the Shamani land.
Mm-hmm.
They say, your God who gave you our land. And then on top of that, you are internally divided by theology. You have Bobo Shanti, you have Nyabingi, you have 12 tribes of Israel. All of them are three diametrically opposed theological positions. So that is not a recipe for progress. And that is not how Africa built its societies pre-colonial, pre-slavery, pre-enslavement era. You know, African spirituality was the foundation of the African civilization. The ancient Egyptians did not build the pyramids, which were the greatest wonders of the world, that today European, Arab, Asian scientists can explain how it was built. They built that on the foundation of African spirituality, on the foundation of the African language. The builders of the pyramid, they did not speak any foreign language. They spoke their African indigenous language. They practiced their African indigenous culture.
Mm-hmm.
They did not need to be perfect English speakers
Right.
in order to be advanced in civilization. Like today, most of us, Africa is still very much divided into Europhones. You know, you have the Anglophone Africa, you have the Lusophone Africa, you have the Francophone Africa, then you have the Maghreb region that is dominated by the Arabs. And in this Europhones zones of Africa, you get perfect English speakers, or you get Africans who are conditioned to believe that speaking a perfect English makes you wise, makes you intelligent. But when you look at the Chinese, they don't need to speak perfect English or to speak English at all in order to invent any modern invention, whether it's a military grade weapon for their own defense, whether it's these gadgets that we are using to communicate with each other, or whether it's computers. They don't need to speak English. You go to the Germans, they had their best scientists, and during the Second World War, Hitler put together a group of best scientists who did not need to speak English to be the best scientists. You go to India. India is one of the advanced civilizations. They don't need to speak English to be advanced in their civilization. You go to Arab, Iran. They don't need to speak perfect English to be able to be such a serious civilization and a military power in the Middle East. So we are indoctrinated and conditioned to believe that we have to be proficient in this language. And when you observe it on social media, we argue on the basis of these foreign languages. You put something there to critique Western or colonial imposition in Africa, be it Christianity, be it Western civilization. You're going to find that the participant in that debate is one group of Africans versus the other group of Africans, or simply house slave versus the field slave, house negro versus the field negro. You hardly get Europeans coming in to defend their own concepts and principles and doctrine. You find Africans who are trying to defend European ideas on the expenses of demeaning their own African culture.
So the different groups that you was talking about, of the different groups of Africans, can you kind of explain what that is for people who doesn't know? That's their first time hearing it.
Well, the different groups of Africans on social media.
Yeah.
Well, that one is very prevalent. You can just scroll through a few of my 3 last posts I put there. One of them was like, we never knew that Jesus died for us until the Europeans came and tell us. Now, if you go to the comment section, I think that is the most reacted post. Is what, about 6,000 reaction, close to 3,000 comments. But if you go to the comment section, you get in 2 types of Africans: those who are defending European ideas, defending European religion, defending Jesus and Christianity, and you're also getting on the other side the group that are opposed to this particular colonial view. So, and it happens in every way, and in every subject. We can put a post and talk about Africans for the Africans. You want to get other Africans who are speaking on behalf of the Europeans and say, oh, we must be all inclusive, one love, we must love one another. You don't get Europeans getting involved. So we are so colonized and so divided from top to bottom that it's not even funny. That you find that we are arguing over European concepts without Europeans themselves. We are arguing over colonial concepts.
And arguing in English too.
Sorry?
I said, and we're arguing in English too.
And we're arguing in English too. And even saying, oh, someone did not write something properly or did not spell anything properly. We're arguing over English grammar. Our debate have been reduced to so much nonsense. They have nonsensified the space. We debate over pettiness. We argue over pettiness. Things that we do on social media, you don't get any other nations do. You don't get Chinese doing this type of argument. Other group of Chinese trying to defend Europeans who colonized them. You don't get Arabs doing the same thing. You only get us. It's only us. You'll find a group of African women bashing their African men, calling them fresh, calling them red flag. You know, we're doing strange things. You get African women who tell you that I'm a strong, independent single woman. You never come across a European woman saying this thing. Or,
She heard that
or
from America.
yeah, it's
She
only
got that from
African.
America.
Yeah, it's a feminist thing. But the white feminists, even after they've organized their feminist campaign and marches and protests, they still go home to their husband, while the black feminists, they go home to sleep alone,
To
claiming
nobody.
to be,
Hmm.
yeah, claiming to be independent and single and strong, while they are very stressed. And then now here they've created a phenomenon called the Ben 10. Is it we older women who are in love with younger boys?
Yeah, I
Um,
saw that.
yeah, using
That's
them for
pedophile.
sexual purposes and all of these things is a result of this Western feminism.
But isn't that pedophilia? I
It's
mean,
pedophilia.
is it pedophilia for a grown man to be with a young girl? So wouldn't that apply for the woman too? A grown woman being with a younger guy,
It
isn't that
should,
the
but
same thing?
we're having double standards. It's like in South Africa, they have a when they talk about gender-based violence, for them, gender means women. It means violence against women. But there is a high record of women who are also abusing men. You know, there are a high record of women who are beating their men, who are killing their men, who are doing all of these things which are considered to be gender-based violence. But because the concept gender is only applied to female, but gender applies to both male and female.
Exactly.
You have things called 16 days of activism against women and children. And then we used to have another program that say, take a girl child to work. So, but the reason being that a boy child is fundamentally wicked from birth. So from he's born a woman abuser and all of these things. So to try to self-correct and bring about social justice, you must bring the girl child and take her to work. You
Hmm.
know. So it is so loop-sided that uh, it misrepresents so much things. Like you were making a point that it's a pedophilia. If men sleep with little girls, is it considered to be pedophilia? Why is it not the same when the older women are sleeping with young boys and undressing for a child who's supposed to be your own child by
Hmm.
age, and using your age and using your resources and using your influence, using your intellect to manipulate this child. So it's a
Hmm.
pedophilia.
Hmm.
But again, it's Western double standard, it's a Western hypocrisy. So we've imbibed all of that Western hypocrisy. I mean, we are more Europeans than the Europeans. We are more Christian than the people who brought us Christianity. We are more religious
It's
than the people
true.
who brought us religion.
It's true.
Even though,
Hmm.
even though there's not a single African word for religion, but you'd be surprised how religious we are, more than the people who brought us religion itself.
Hmm.
So it's a sad reality.
Yeah, it is super sad because even our elders are going backwards.
Yeah, we are not progressing, we are regressing.
Hmm.
We're going backward in every aspect and in every field of consciousness and liberation. I mean, I see women who were Rasta for many years talking about they are liberated and all of that, and all of a sudden they turn from being Rasta, they start to put the white women's hair, they start to put makeup, they try to look like white women. You see that it's a regression. It's not a progress, but they consider it to be progress.
Mm-hmm.
So we are going backward.
Mm-hmm. So how do we even start restoring that type of behavior?
Well, to tell you the honest truth,
Because you did speak about restoration on one of your posts, and I thought
yes,
that was a good, you know, to ponder on, because we don't look at it from that perspective. We don't think we need
yes,
to be restored. We don't think we should go to therapy. We look down on therapy. Oh, black people don't go to therapy. African people don't go to therapy. What are you talking about? But we need to be in therapy. That's why we're so jacked up,
telling you
because
a
we're
lot
not
of black
going to
people are, I'm telling you, a lot of black people are suffering from post-traumatic Christian disorder. They are
We know it.
suffering from Stockholm syndrome. They are suffering from Willie Lynch mentality. They are suffering from schizophrenia. Now, all of these things are mental disorder. Uh, and that is where it began. And remember, when Rastafari came, Rastafari pointed out the problem, which is mental slavery. And Rastafari also pointed out solution to mental slavery, which is mental liberation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and that is where it all began, because the battle has always been the battle over the mind of the African, the battle over the soul of the African, the battle over the body of the African. Now, for the battle for the mind, we need to recognize that we are dealing with a mental side. We are dealing with a deliberate mental drafting of the African, mental killing of the African. And some of the things that Christianity successfully imposed on African is paralysis of analysis. That once you are in this frame of mind, you are paralyzed to analyze any of your problems, because when you do analyze or you do dare to analyze, you are quickly labeled to be questioning God. If I'm going to put a question there and say, is the Bible the word of God or the Bible the word about God? A whole lot of response I'm going to get is that, oh, you're questioning God. All of that. While I'm questioning a book, that is this book the word of God or the word about God? And if you say it's the word of God, show me which part of this book we claim that it was written by God, because this book, it begins by saying Genesis, the first book of Moses, Exodus, the second book of Moses, Leviticus, the third book of Moses, Numbers, the fourth book of Moses, Deuteronomy, the fifth book of Moses. Then it goes to Joshua, it goes to book of Job, all the way to the book of Revelation. It say the revelations of St. John. So there is no part of this book we claim that it was authored by God. It speaks of men who authored it: Moses, Joshua, all these characters.
Mm-hmm.
But there is no one part of it that claim the authorship of God. And now when you question such simple logic like this, you are quickly labeled to be questioning God, or you must read the Bible properly, you are ignorant, and all of this it's a paralysis of analysis that is imposed on us mentally. And then of course we have the problem of schizophrenia, which is a result of us trying to integrate the European side with the African side, instead of integrating the old African side or the ancient African side, which is our heritage, with our modern African side, which is our reality, in order to create a new African consciousness. So instead of going there, we try to integrate two diametrically opposed ideas that are antithetical to each other, in order to create an African consciousness. And we come out with this dual consciousness, we come up with this double consciousness, where we are double talking on anything, including Rastafari, that is trying to incorporate the African side, which is our reality, with the biblical side, which is what we inherited through slavery. Because you must remember that during slavery, Africans were not allowed to read any other book except the Bible. and they were not even allowed to play the drums. So now this book, which was given to us by slave master during slavery, and we want to turn around and try to Africanize. And the dilemma is, even if we paint Jesus black, we still don't paint the theology black. So the theology is still antithetical, is still anti-African, is still diametrically opposed to our African spiritual reality. Because when you come to African spirituality, we don't have a God that is like the God of the Bible. We don't have a God like Jehovah, an insane God, an omnipotent lunatic, a God with petty human emotions, a jealous God. You don't get that within the African spiritual cosmology. So it's things that we inherited them through colonialism, from slavery, and we try to incorporate them. And pertinent questions are asked: can a slave and a slave master worship the same God? Can the oppressor and the oppressed worship the same God? And if they do, who does God listen to? And history has shown us that the God of the slave master listened to the slave. They even have it written in their Bible that slave, obey your master. So they even give directive as to how to treat a slave. They're in the Bible, they're in the book of Leviticus, how to treat your slave. You can beat them, you can't beat them to death, all this type of thing, how to subdue them. You understand? So, and we want to take that sick view of reality and superimpose it on ourselves as if we don't have a healthy view of reality coming from the African continent. So to restore ourselves, we have to return to our African ancestral consciousness in order to define our current African consciousness. We have to return to our ancestors' consciousness in order to define our current consciousness. We have to understand that if you worship the God of the enemy of your ancestors, you are your ancestors' enemy. We need to understand the African ancestral concept from an African point of view, not from what Western scholarship, Western theologians, Western anthropologists, Western sociologists have defined it for us, the likes of Herbert Spencer and Levi Broll and Max F. Mueller, Edwin Smith, Robert Moffat, David Livingston, Mungo Park, and all these people who wrote volumes and volumes to try to inform us. We need to understand that we have to be informed and be instructed by our own ancestors. We can't be informed and be informed by other people's ancestors. So we have to return to African indigenous ancestral knowledge, which is still very much alive, in order to restore ourselves. It's no we are going to rebuild ourselves by using the tools of the earth. We need to use our own tools. We need to use our ancestral tools of analysis, tools of restoration, tools of rebuilding, tools of renaissance, to return to our own African renaissance. Otherwise, what we are doing is a great disservice to ourselves, thinking that we are going to use the Bible, which is not African, to rebuild ourselves or to restore ourselves. So we need to return to our own modality. We need to begin to think. We need to begin to think in terms of African concepts, ideas, and principles as African people, both at home and abroad. That these are principles that are necessary for our own existence and our own survival. They form part of our African ontology. They form part of our African epistemology. They form part of our African cosmology. They form part of our African axiology, our African value system, what we call Ubuntu. So now the Africans have been scared away from Africa in terms of the physical Africa, the conceptual Africa, the epistemological Africa, the political Africa, the ontological Africa, the historical Africa, the cultural Africa, the spiritual Africa. So we're flirting with so many foreign ideas. You get others who say they are into yoga, and they start to tell that, oh, yoga was come from Egypt, and what they say, look, man, listen, the word yoga itself is Sanskrit. It's Indian, it's not African. So just to start there, because if you can't name it, you can't claim it. If you don't have the African name for this thing that you're trying to Africanize it, you are engaged in self-colonization. You are engaged in self-enslavement. Now we also need to.
You don't think any yoga comes from Africa?
No, there's no yoga coming from Africa. Dr. Muwat Ashby is one of the people who misled our people about this thing that yoga is Kemetic and all of that. I have a couple of his books, I read them, and he clearly states about the Sanskrit thing. You see this notion that Ethiopia ruled all the way to India, to River Ganges. Therefore, it is an excuse to adopt Indian things because at one time, India was ruled by Ethiopians. Ethiopians did not superimpose their culture and their spiritual thought on India. They just ruled India. So whether we once ruled India, it does not give us excuse to appropriate or expropriate the Indian culture and make it our own. So we have a lot of meditational system here in Africa. We just need to return to our African consciousness. We just need to return to our African knowledge system. And what we need to do in this process, we need to be very honest with ourselves. We must never lie to ourselves about history in order to have history. We have a rich history. And we need to go to that history to get all of that. But yoga is not African, does not come from Africa, does not come from Tibet.
So even on the walls in Kemet, you see them doing yoga poses, martial arts. You know,
it's somebody with a yoga mindset reading Egyptian and trying to.
So there's a yoga system called Smai Taiwi.
Smai Taiwi does not mean yoga; it means union of the two lands.
Right, but
so
Dr. Ashby.
Yeah, those are Ashby's teachings. You know, I mean, if you read, just give me a moment. I think I have one of his books on my bag here. But I always carry books around, although I'm not home, but always carry these things. With situations like this, I'm just gonna read one of the introductions of his work. Egyptian Yoga, African Religion, Volume 2. So, if you read his work here, you're going to see this clear. You're going to see this clear confusion where he says, our primary goals are to provide the wisdom of ancient spiritual teaching in books, courses, and other forms of communication. Secondly, to provide expert instruction and training in the various yogic disciplines, including ancient Egyptian philosophy, Christian Gnosticism, Indian philosophy, and modern science. Thirdly, to promote world peace and universal love. You see, these are integrationists. These are assimilationists. These are people who are into integrating with everybody, Christians. You talk about Christian Gnosticism, Indian philosophy, Egyptian philosophy, yogic disciplines, and then you talk about peace and universal love. And this is a problem because we Africans, we are duped to believe that we are responsible for bringing world peace. We're not responsible for world peace. We're responsible for the African peace. We're responsible for African prosperity. Charity begins at home. Conceptual clarity like charity begins at home. This idea that we go around as if The whole responsibility of world peace is on our shoulders. When you have to bring a world peace between nations that have nuclear bombs, when there is not even a single African country with a nuclear bomb, how do you bring peace? Nuclear bomb is a deterrent. You don't have even a deterrent or anything that will make anyone listen to you. So we're going around and coming up with this type of philosophy of one love and universal peace and all of these things. And that is what also messed up the Rastafari movement when it moved from the black supremacy doctrine of Leonard Howell to the one love movement of Bob Marley's song. That you start to have white people claiming to be Rasta, Asians claiming to be Rasta. So we move away from the black liberation. We are start to get caught up with universal redemption, universal peace, world peace. Those are two big ideals for us. The world will never know peace until Africa is free. That is what Haile Selassie said. That is what most African teachers have said. Kwame Nkrumah, any fundamental Marcus Garvey, fundamental African teachers. That's why Marcus Garvey was focusing on hate first. Let's liberate ourselves first before we can think of liberating the world. Now we are deluded and given a false consciousness that we are here to free the world before we can free ourselves. It doesn't work like that. It will never work like that. You can't free the world before you free yourself. You can't rule the nation if you can't manage your family properly. So, and this is the things that the likes of Dr. Muad Ashby, they are teaching us, because they are assimilationists. They go around assimilating everything: Christian Gnosticism, Egyptian philosophy, Indian philosophy, yogic disciplines, and all of these things. And they are creating this syncretism that is just filling our head with this schizophrenia.
Schizophrenia.
Africans have a serious dysfunctional European psychological tendencies: schizophrenia, post-traumatic Christian disorder syndrome, Willie Lynch mentality, barrel mentality, all these dysfunctional psychological tendencies. And I used to say in Rastafari as early as 20 years ago that Rastafari don't need priests. We don't have a spiritual problem here. Rastafari needs psychiatrists. We have mental problem.
Yes, true therapy. Seriously.
Yeah, we need therapy. This is a big psych ward. This is a mental hospital. So lunatics are running the asylum. Well. Sorry?
I said it's also genetic,
It becomes genetic because we're passing generational traumas. We have done away with our African healing system, our way of detoxifying ourselves from these toxins. So we say, oh, those things are Piagan, those things are African, those things are backward, I are Rasta, I Ethiopian, I Jamaican. So we are rejecting the fundamental African holistic health. We're rejecting how our ancestors used to deal with mental problems. We had multitude of mental problems and we had cure for them. And what we are going through as African today is a serious mental disease. The amount of Africans now, this weekend, from Friday, they say Good Friday, Jesus died for them. And then Monday, they'll be having Easter Monday and all of these things. The amount of Africans who are having a white man hanging on their wall and still singing and say, I will have no foreign God, while the God they're hanging on their head does not even look like them. And they will go and read the Bible that say they must not have strange gods. But that strange God exempts the white Jesus for them as black people. It's a serious mental disorder. There is a serious incoherence that is taking place in our mental state. And because we have a high tolerance for abuse, you can look at how much we tolerated genocide, how much we tolerated slavery. If you are enslaved for more than 300 years, you are passing this thing genetically. You're passing this high tolerance for abuse for so many centuries, to the point that you don't see it anymore, that you are going through a serious abusive system called Christianity. You just think it's business as usual. So when there is a white Jesus hanging on the wall there, you don't see any difference while you are a black person. And yet in your Christian song, you're talking about having no foreign God, or in your 10 commandments, you are taught about thou shalt not have strange gods, but you have gods who are stranger than you. So it's a serious mental blindness, it's a serious spiritual blindness that we are going through as Africans. And because we have normalized it, we don't recognize it anymore. It has become business as usual. It's normalized.
Yeah, it's definitely in the DNA. It's
It is in the
definitely.
DNA. And that is why the healing must be total. The restoration must be total. It must be mental, physical, spiritual, genetic. It must be total. You look at most of our leaders during the liberation struggle, during independence movement, they married white women. Kwame Nkrumah had his Arab woman, Jomo Kenyatta had his British woman, the president of Botswana, the first president of Botswana, had a British woman, British white woman, and then the president of Senegal had a French woman. And you understand, you get when black people get successful, they marry white women.
I know.
So yeah, so it's a serious problem that is even embedded in our country.
It's definitely bad in America. As soon as they get
Mhm.
rich, they switch. They find them a white woman, a Spanish woman, or of another ethnic group because they
Yes.
claim that the black woman is too angry and she always wants to argue and things like that. So they
So
use
they need
that
to put up
an
with
excuse to say the white woman just listens to what I say. We don't argue. We don't this. We don't that. But she's clocking his bank account in the process. So anytime that divorce happened, she ends up walking off with almost all of his profits.
Yes, and they are not learning from that, because the list is endless. You can talk about Tiger Woods, you can talk about all this bunch of black
Yeah,
men
he just had a
whom,
horrible car accident.
yeah, and they're not learning from that. And again, the black man must put up with the black woman's problem, her argumentativeness, her whatever. You need to understand where does it come from, because we are damaged. Both the black men and black women were damaged. You can't point out fingers at the black woman and say she's so damaged. Now the excuse for that is to go and cohabit and
That's what they
crossbreed
say.
with.
That be the excuse.
Not the
That's
lame
real.
excuse.
Hmm.
The lame excuse. The African American man must come and find the African woman here, and the African American woman must come and find the African man here in Africa. The lame excuse is a plantation mentality, the slavery mentality. You're not going to you are not going to solve problem by avoiding it. You are not solving the problem that is fundamental. The black woman is the natural complement of the black man. Damaged or not.
Hmm.
What, what
Exactly.
made what made Socrates one of the greatest philosophers in history? He married the most argumentative woman, the most disrespectful woman. So he turned that dysfunctional relationship into a learning curve for him. So he exercised how to argue by arguing with this woman. He became one of the greatest debaters because he was debating with this woman. He was constantly in argument to get her perspective of things. So the black man must tolerate a black woman that is a natural complement. That is the one who is genetically disposed to be complementary and complement to him.
Hmm.
There is no excuse to do away with the African woman.
Yeah. So can you see the screen?
Um,
Let me know if you can see it. If I make it a little
I can,
bigger.
I can see the screen What's going on the screen?
Can you read it?
I just
Is it
see
too
this.
small?
I don't have the big screen. I don't have the. I think it's small. I can't
Okay.
read it.
So this is from the Quran. It says, "You will kill non-Muslims to receive 72 virgins in heaven." Quran 9,
Mm.
111.
It's another sick view of reality. What are you gonna do with the 72 virgins in heaven? Heaven must be a brothel. Hmm? You gotta spend 72 days making virginity. It's a sick view of reality that black people should stay away from. It's no such thing. It's a religious indoctrination in its highest level.
And then it goes on to say, "You will kill anyone who leaves Islam."
You'll kill anyone
Who leaves Islam. So if you want to leave Islam, you don't want to be Muslim anymore, you have to be killed.
That is why I say Judaism, Christianity, and Islam should be perceived by the African consciousness the same way Nazis will be perceived by the by the Jewish consciousness. This is a mental, spiritual genocide.
Mm-hmm.
A mental side for a black man to adhere to such kind of doctrine. It is good for Arab, the religion of the Arabs. They must practice it among themselves and kill one another when they turn their back against Islam, but they must leave the black people out of it.
You will kill and be killed for Allah.
You see, Islam is a violent religion,
Verse
Allah is
number
a
4.
violent God, and the Quran is a violent book.
You will
And
terrorize non-Muslims, steal
mhm.
from non-Muslims, lie to strengthen Islam.
So tell me now, Islam supposed to mean peace. How is that relevant to Islam? How is that coherent with Islam if Islam means peace while it is preaching extreme form of violence?
You will behead non-Muslims.
And that is the cause of Boko Haram in Nigeria and Al Shabaab in Somalia and this Islamic extremist group in
Yes.
Africa. Africans, we never fought over religion, we never fought over God.
And that right there I just read shows what's going on in, like you just said, in those northeastern eastern regions of Africa. That particular religion is doing just what it says to do.
And that is the cause of civil war in Africa. You know, Africans, we never fought over religion, we never fought over God. But ever since the Europeans and the Arabs introduced Christianity and Islam in Africa, we are fighting and killing one another in the name of God. That is not an African spiritual position.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Africans consider life to be sacred. It's like in the year 2000, I went to the Nyabingi with 3 of my queens. And then one brother turned the bass drum towards me and hit it with such a staccato. And he went like, death, judgment, heart attack, lava, earthquake to the man who took the woman.
That's
So
what they said to you?
that's what they said to me. And I told them that you have
Mm-hmm.
effectively made Nyabingi a violent religion.
That's none of his business, first of all.
But that is what they are preaching, you know. They'll go like, death to you when you disagree with them, death to you, heart attack, judgment. You see. So
Mm-mm.
we have incorporated non-African things into African spiritual space of Rastafari.
He need to mind his business because I don't have nothing to do with you going to Bingy with your wives.
Unfortunately, most Rasta don't mind their own business. They are incapable of minding their own business. They are always into other people's business.
You need to go fire burn white supremacy. That's who you need to bring that anger to.
Yeah, they're supposed to be focusing on white supremacy. That is what we are.
And then you can't even begin to build with people with that mentality because they're in a little box themselves, you know.
So, it's that
Mm-mm.
reality that you think of.
But yeah, Thau, you be bringing the flames to the social media. You do, and
Yeah.
you making them think. You know, you're not telling them to believe you. You just make them think. If they even just take time to go research it, just put the
Yeah.
arrogance and the ego aside. You know, just do
Yeah.
themselves a favor and put all that aside and just see it for what it is. Don't worry about who said it. But they too busy not trying to like a person. They don't like you, so I don't want to hear nothing you have to say. So we
Well,
just keep walking around with this brain battle, you know?
it's when you understand the type of people you're dealing with, you don't get bothered by this type of pettiness because you realize that you're dealing with people who are very mentally enslaved, uh, who are being brought to the pettiness.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Even non-Rasta, most Africans also have the same problem. I remember I put one time I put a video on TikTok in 2023. I said, "My dear African brothers and sisters, tell me what is it that Jesus has saved you from? Those of you that Jesus saved you, because you're still experiencing oppression. Apartheid was a Christian doctrine. The people who oppressed you during apartheid believed in the same Jesus as yourself. So some of the responses, people will be like, when are you cutting your beard? Instead of debating with what you put up there, they start to tell you about yourself, your beard, oh, you are Rasta, you have smoked too much ganja, oh, you are confused, they psychoanalyze you without even knowing you, they dissect you, they do all type of things because we are proving more and more to the world that we are not yet even matured for a matured debate. So you bring in a mature debate, people start to get personal on you. Some of them I don't respond to them when I get time to talk through my post this morning when I wake up, I check the post I put about Jesus. I found it was 6,000 reactions and more than 2,000 comments. I'm thinking I'm not going to read all those 2,000 comments, you know. And when you go through them, it's people who are just trying to insult you personally without personally knowing you. Instead of debating with the subject you put there, that
Mm-hmm.
we Africans don't know that Jesus died for us until the white man came to tell us. So how sensible is this? Because they're not going to debate the sense in that they're going to try to tell you about you.
Yeah, Winifred Jingo said to give the general my regards.
Oh, well, whenever you go, okay, my brethren.
Yeah, he said he's
um,
tuning in now.
oh, tuning in.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, pass love to him. That one is my brethren. He's been there. We used to have a lot
Mm-hmm.
of people there. We used to have a lot of conversation. He will bring in some group of elders and we will talk about African spirituality, African custom. I think it's in one of the Caribbean islands.
Yeah, Saint Lucia. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
he's definitely a good spirit.
yeah. Yes, I know, and a learned brother,
Hmm.
as scholars.
Hmm.
That is what we need in the movement, learned brothers, not people who are indoctrinated with the Bible. He's very open-minded, studied a lot of
Hmm.
it. He sent me some PDF books, actually, I think late last year. We've been just comparing notes, sharing information.
Okay. Yeah. Winning for Jingo's been on this platform a few times, and every time he comes on, it's always a good food. Your cup is always filled. Yeah. So, what do you think about the president of Ghana going to the United Nations in New York, speaking on you know the reparations behalf?
Can you hear me,
Yes, I can hear you. Hmm.
Empress?
Yes, I can hear you. I hear you. Can you hear me? I can hear you.
Yeah, I was disconnected. I only realize when I'm talking alone here that I'm disconnected.
I know that happens sometimes. I have the mic on mute and I just talk for like 5 minutes.
Yeah, I did not even look at the phone and I'm busy chit chatting alone here and I realize that, oh, damn, I'm disconnected.
Yeah, I was asking you about the president of Ghana when he went to the United Nations in New York the other day. He was speaking on behalf of
Mm,
reparations. And some people seem to think
mm.
that the man actually is trying to steal reparations. That's the most dumbest thing you could ever want to hear. Because
Man,
how is
that
he
is the
going to steal
problem with our.
something that we don't even have? We don't even have it. So how is he trying to steal it? He can't. He knows he can't take it. He's speaking on our behalf, so we can get it, and then we can start communicating more with the continent and do commerce and importing and exporting. You know what I'm saying? Start making the connection. It's not about trying to get the money. We don't even have
That's a problem.
reparations yet. We're still fighting on who should get it and who shouldn't.
Yeah, that's the problem with us. We are always paranoia. We are always suspicious. These are all mental disorders that we're
Ridiculous.
suffering from. We don't trust each other. It is happening here in South Africa too. Once they hear that we are talking to the government, they say, oh, they're going to ask money from the government. They're going to eat our money. And then you don't talk to government. No one is talking to government. You talk to government. And we usually talk to government when government talk to us. We don't just go and approach government. But also we still have a lot of issues that we need to talk to government about, like Rastafari children who are still being discriminated in school because of their dreadlocks. You
Mm-hmm.
know, the Rasta at the labor market, those who are working, every now and then they are subjected to this urine test. They say they're trying to test the cannabis content in their urine. So we have issues that make us to engage government. Like this year, we are also going to the Constitutional Court again because the 2018 ruling of ganja it benefit white people than black people, and let alone the historically marginalized Rastafari are benefiting nothing. But all of a sudden, we have a huge community of white people who are now into the ganja business. So we have to go and talk. Go there, we are divided. You hear people say, you see, they want to get the money. And then there is another Jamaican Rasta brethren who is here in South Africa from 2019. The biggest conspiracy theorist. He's always accusing people of conspiracies, selling out, and all of these things. He just make things worse because they are forever suspicious. They are steeped in the crab in a barrel mentality.
Mm.
So crab in a barrel mentality type of thing. So the war is being internalized. We are a movement at war with itself. Uh, we don't trust anything or any form of goodwill. I mean, Ghana is not only talking about repatriation. Ghana is issuing citizenship to the Africans in the diaspora. So
I
it is
know.
not only
That's right.
it's not only talking the talk, but it is walking the talk. But again, you are going to get the
Mm-hmm.
eternal skeptics who are trying to find something wrong with that. If
Mm-hmm.
it's not an African country that speaks for the Africans, who should do that? It is the African country, the African president is speaking with the prestige of a state power. So when he presents certain issues, they are likely to be heard than when we go there without any state power and any state backing. So it's a serious problem. Once you get people to speak for us, we start to accuse them of our own fears of the psychologically unknown. We start to accuse them of things
Mm-hmm.
that they don't even think about because
Right.
it is the criminal mind. The criminal mind always see criminal people and accuse them of their own evil. So they should be thankful that someone put the issue on the agenda. His Majesty said repatriation is a government to government program. It's a government to government issue from 1960 when you have the first Back to Africa mission that was led by Mortimer Plano, Fillmore Alvaranga, and Douglas Mack in 1960 and 1963 before His Majesty came to Jamaica in 1966. His Majesty told them that repatriation is a government to government program. So we need to be able to lobby government or find governments in Africa that are friendly to our issues. Like Ghana is friendly to the issue of repatriation. How long we talk about repatriation, sing about repatriation, we talk
I
about
know.
repatriation, you know.
Right.
So when we find a head of state who's willing to put his head on the chopping block and speak
Mm-hmm.
for us, use him of our own nonsense.
Mm-hmm. And
So
they were
we
very
should
disrespectful about it too. Their little, you know, disrespectful slurs that they were saying. And this is coming from this so-called FBA group, these foundational Black Americans. They were in the
mm,
background while other, African Americans were trying to affiliate themselves with the president, network with him, build a common relationship on the same topic that he's speaking of. And right, that was nice, that was beautiful. But then behind you, you have these fools talking about, oh, you're just trying to come and steal our money, and You're trying to take our reparations. Y'all sold us out. You know, they're really penetrating on y'all sold us out. Y'all sold us out too. So now you equating how much, not even equating it. Now you're just saying because the white person did it, the black people did it too, Africans did it too. We all slaved each other. So it doesn't matter anymore. And it's the mind is just thinking that way to the point where they feel like he's actually trying to steal our reparations after all that
Well,
Ghana has did to reach out to the diaspora. Because you made a great point. You got Jamaicans repatriated in Ghana, you got African Americans, people from the parts of the Caribbean, even in England, black people in England going back home to Africa. You understand what I'm saying?
yes,
So
but it's
right.
a full stop. It's a fully stop because where reparation is not about only um, the Africans in the diaspora. Uh, it is first of all, it is not historically correct that all Africans in Africa sold out all Africans in the African
Exactly.
diaspora.
It's not the whole
So
continent.
there are certain parts of this continent that were never touched by slavery. Uh, like the slavery in South Africa, it had nothing to do with transatlantic slave trade. It was the Dutch East India Company who went on through 100 voyages to Malaysia to go and pick up the Malays and created what we have today as the Cape Colored Malay. This mixed breed of half Europeans, half Africans, half Malaysians. You get a whole lot of them in the Cape, around Cape Town and those areas. So
Wow.
the, the slavery that took place in Africa was not transatlantic slave trade, was trans-Indian Ocean slave trade. They
Right.
were going to Asia. The Dutch East India Company uh, undertook 100 voyages to go and pick up the slave Malays to come and work. Like the Indians, we have more Indians in KwaZulu, in South Africa, in the land of the Zulus.
Mm.
Sometimes Noah will be making a joke and say it's a little Mumbai or Bombay, where there's more Indians in South Africa than in India. And when they brought them to plant sugar cane. They refer to them as the coolies. So they went to take them from India. So most of slavery that was taking place here was about enslaving the Malaysians and the Indians and
Yeah.
bringing them here. That today we have a large populations of Indians, we have a large population of Malaysians, but we don't have a record of slave people leaving South Africa to the West. So whether to North America, South America, or the Caribbean or Europe, we don't have that. So therefore, it is historically incorrect to blame the whole continent for slavery and to blame every single African for enslaving Africans in the West or for selling them out to the slave masters. Yes, there are Africans who participated in slavery, and it can also be explained historically. And in most of those cases, is those Africans kingdoms that were already converted to Eastern Christianity, like the Sokoto Empire, the Oyo Empire, those Futa Jalon, all those Islamic kingdoms. Remember, by the 11th century, you had the richest man in Africa or in the world called Mansa Musa. But Mansa Musa was a Muslim,
Mm-hmm.
you know, even
Mm-hmm.
with the Africa, but he was a Muslim. He took a whole
Right.
lot of gold of to take it to Mecca. So therefore, you already had Islamic states in Africa. We talk about the civilization of Timbuktu, but civilization of Timbuktu is an Islamic civilization in Africa. We talk about the civilization of Aksum in Ethiopia. When you look at the Aksumite civilization, there were three languages they were using. They were using the Ge'ez, they were using Greek language, and they were using the Sabian language. So those places, they were already Hellenized. They already absorbed Abrahamic religions, which are slave-making religions: Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. So we need to also understand the history of slavery. Which type of Africans were selling other Africans? They were converted Africans. They were Muslim because an African in his proper African spiritual tradition and African culture, he understands the sacredness of life. You don't sell human beings. You don't keep human beings. That is why we never had
Mm-hmm.
jail. in an indigenous African, in our normal African society, we never had
Exactly.
jails, we never had old age homes. We stayed with the elders. We consider them to be a talking book and a library on legs. That is why we have an African proverb that when an elderly person died, we say a library is burned down. Understand? A big tree has fallen. Big tree of knowledge has fallen. So, in a normal African society based on indigenous African culture, there was no slavery, there was no prison, there was no old age home. Slavery was practiced in those those parts of Africa where Africans were already converted to these slave-making religions like Islam, like Christianity. We talked about slaves obeying their master, like Judaism, all these dynamics of the we and them. These things of we are holy, you are profane. We never had that in an indigenous African society. So once you start to have these things infiltrated in our African society of the we and them, that we are holy, you are unholy, we are Christian, you are heathen. So once you otherize other people, you dehumanize them, and once you dehumanize them, you can turn them into slaves. You can turn them into all type of nonsense.
And that's just thousands and thousands of years of it.
Mm. So we need to understand the history of Africa and ancient Kemet. People will talk about Egypt. This, oh, Christ was taken to Egypt when he was little. When Christ was taken to Egypt, Egypt has stopped being African for more than 1,000 years. From 525 BC, Egypt was invaded by the Persians, Cambyses of Persia, followed by Darius the Great, and Cyrus, all these Persians. And after them, they were replaced by Alexander the Great. And after Alexander the Great, they were replaced by the Romans. And when Alexander the Great went to Egypt, it was 332 BC. And when the Romans ruled Egypt, was around 46 BC. So you're talking about more than 500 years before the birth of Christ that Egypt has long stopped being African. When they say, oh, Christianity is African, why would Jesus be taken to go and hide in Egypt? Egypt was no longer a black-dominated country. It was dominated by the Persians, by the Greeks, and by the Arabs, and by the Romans.
Mm-hmm. This is a good history lesson.
We need to understand African history within context.
Mm-hmm.
Because it is in Africa, therefore it is African. Like this, the first Christian church was in Africa. Which part of Africa was it? North Africa, Egypt. Was Egypt still practicing its indigenous African culture? No, it was long stopped practicing it. It was already Hellenized. They were dealing with the cult of Serapis. That is when they combine the cult of Serapis with the cult of Jesus, and come up with this Christ concept. So we need to study our history and understand it, and stop just putting a blanket approach that, oh, it was in Africa. When most people, they say, oh, this thing is from Africa or it's African. I say apartheid was made in South Africa. Does that make apartheid African?
Mm-hmm.
It's not African. It was people who have been here for about 500 years. So when they invent apartheid, they were already here for about 500 years. So it doesn't make apartheid an African concept, but it was made here by people who are contesting identity with us. We call ourselves African, they call themselves Afrikaner, which is Dutch for African. They say their language is Afrikaans, which is Dutch for African. But these people are speaking a European language, and they are of European descent. And they ruled us until 1994, and they still control our economy. They are one of the 9 families who are running South African economy. We refer to as the Stellenbosch Mafia. Those are 9 Afrikaner families with their Afrikaner Christian secret society called the Afrikaner Broederbond. So they were already entrenched here. When the British hand over the governance of South Africa, they handed over to these Dutch, who ruled until 1994, when they handed Mandela over. So we need to be very contextual when it comes to Africa. Africa is a huge continent, is diverse. I always say that when I teach about African history, that there are three streams of African history. The ancient stream, there is an old stream, there is a modern stream. There is a ancient Africa, old Africa, and modern Africa. Now, modern Africa is a result of colonialism and neo-colonialism. And as a result, neo-colonialism produced a neo-African culture. A culture where me and you as Africans have to be having this conversation in English instead of in our indigenous African language. So we look at those dynamics that for 200 years here in South Africa, we were thoroughly Christianized. To the point that some Africans, they think we have always been Christian. But we have been here for millions of years, and Christianity has only been here less than 200 years. Most of our people, they behave like we have always been Christian, or Christianity is part of our culture, or part of our spiritual expression. But it is the result of being ignorant. When you are ignorant of your African culture, then you will make those assumptions. So
and African people don't want to read to go back into that history that you're talking about, because it would put a lot of things in context that they thought that they knew because of their religion. When you start putting the timelines together, they're not really paralleling, you know?
They're not paralleling. They don't make sense because we are not working with a timeline. We're just working with a blanket approach. But blanket approach is going to work. You know, we need to put timelines. There have always been timelines. So, and hence we divide the timelines into three and say, okay, let's focus on ancient Africa. Ancient Africa, we are talking about from the time when Africans are the only people on the earth. Before the European mutate out of our respective genes, before the Asians, the Arabs came into existence, there was Africa. About 150,000 years ago, human beings who are morphologically the same as the modern African were found in nowhere else on earth except by the foothills of the mountains of the moon, by the beginning of the Nile, by the Great Lakes regions. And there were no other human beings anywhere else until 40,000 years ago. They started to move out and they went on to become the Grimaldi, who became the ancestors of the Europeans. But for many, many, many years, we were only alone on this earth. And that formed part of our ancient history. That is part of our Zeptebi. That is part of our Emandulo, Embo. Timeless immemorial, our Zamani period. Before we get to the faster period, we had a Zamani period. Now, from there you go to Old Africa. Old Africa is this Africa now that is engaging in, that is dealing with Western European and Arab genocide, that is dealing with European and Arab conversion, proselytization, Christianity and Islam, that is dealing with European and Arab slavery. Europeans were not the only one who enslaved Africans. Actually, Arabs did enslave Africans and Ethiopians. Ethiopia practiced domestic slavery until 1943. And Ethiopia practiced domestic colonialism. The light-skinned Ethiopians enslaved the dark-skinned Ethiopians and called them Galas and Varia. And their slavery was the Trans-Sahara slave trade that we don't even talk about, but there are books about that, where they talk about the Ethiopian slavery. Actually, see the path that Africans are trying to use going through Libya to go and reach Europe, Spain. It was a slave route before, the Trans-Sahara slave trade. So you had a transatlantic slave trade, you had a trans-Arabia slave trade, and then you have a trans-Sahara slave trade. And the trans-Sahara slave trade was used by the Ethiopian, the Aksumite paradigm, the Aksumite Empire, the Tigrian Amhara imperialism. They used that and enslaved dark-skinned Ethiopians. So, because most of our Pan-Africanists and our Ethiopianists and our black nationalists and our black conscious and our Rastafari, they are so obsessed with Ethiopia, they don't want to have a conversation about Ethiopian people. Ethiopian slavery was ended by Haile Selassie.
So the Ethiopians basically had a caste system too.
Yes, they had a colorism, they have problem of colorism, and they had names for the dark-skinned Ethiopians. You know, they will call them Baria, which means slave. They will call them Bagala, which was at one time a common title for the Oromos. So they had the ruling class, the Solomonic ruling class. Ethiopia had three classes. The what they call Bete Menges, the house of governance, and then the Bete Kahanat, the house of priesthood, and then the Gada system or the Geber, which means the workers. Like when you say Gabra Selassie, Gabra Exabier, it literally means the slave of God. So the Gebers were slaves, or the peasant. The ruling class, you had the ruling class in the form of the monarchy, you had the other ruling class in a form of the clergy, the priesthood, which were the biggest landowners, the biggest slave owners, and then you had the peasant, which were called the Gabra. So there is a book written by an Ethiopian called, the name of the title of the book is called The Making of Modern Ethiopia from 1896 to 1974. It is written by a man called Tishale Tibebu. It breaks these things into proper historical context and explain Ethiopia by an Ethiopian. I'm not talking about a disgruntled Rastafari like myself or whatever. I'm talking about an Ethiopian scholar who said Ethiopia, actually they even had name for Africans who refused to convert to Christianity. They were engaged in false conversion. Every emperor, the relationship between the church and state was that the church protects the emperor and claim his sanctity and divinity, but the emperor must expand the kingdom. So the expansion of the kingdom entails, among others, the conversion of what they call the heathen tribes of Ethiopia. Ethiopia has got about 83 tribes, and the major ruling tribes are the Amharas and the Tigray. So these so-called heathen tribes were Oromos, Sidamas, Afer, Hamer, Benishangul, Humus, all these groups. And then they had a term for them, a Giz term, an Amharic term for them. They were calling them Altatamaku Ahazeb, unbaptized heathens, that they needed to baptize them. So Ethiopian Christianity was as destructive to African culture and African spirituality as the European Christianity. So when people tell you that, oh, Ethiopia was Christian before, or we must follow Ethiopian Christianity was a slave-making Christianity, was a caste Christianity, was a class Christianity, was colorism Christianity. And these things are documented in writings. Tibebu Tishale, in his book, he goes into the details of explaining these dynamics of the Aksumite paradigm. I have one that book too. It's called The Making of Modern Ethiopia. So it's good if you can take it online and read it for yourself and realize that How did Christianity got introduced to Ethiopia, and how was it spread among the darker in Ethiopians? But also, there are two interesting videos by an Ethiopian woman on YouTube. Her name is Waini Tesfa. She called her program Plan B, Back to Africa. How she left Germany with her two children to come back to Africa. She talks about Ethiopian colorism. She talks about um, Ethiopian slavery. You know, she talks in details about this thing, and she's Ethiopian. So, I mean, I can't be accused of being anti-Ethiopian. I have a very collection of Ethiopian books. Remember, I was once given a scholarship to study in Ethiopia, so I have a collection of books
Okay.
that I came with from Ethiopia. I studied within the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, so I'm not sampling things here. As much as most people will be saying, "Oh, Christianity originated in Ethiopia," that is a claim that is made by Ethiopian Pan-Africanists, Black conscious African nationalists, and Rastafari. But the Ethiopians don't make those claims. When you get into those institutions, they will tell you about the origin of Christianity, who brought it to Ethiopia. And you must read carefully the speech of His Majesty. He said, "We in Ethiopia were the first to receive the religion of the Old Testament. And we were also the first to receive the religion of the New Testament." You ask, receive it from who? That makes people say, "Oh, Christianity was brought to Ethiopia or was brought to Africa before it was in Europe." Was brought to Africa from where? By who? And when you say this is African, which African nation, which African tribe invented this religion that you say it is African? And you agree that it was brought here. Brought by who? For what purpose? Who said we did not have any concept of God? Why was it necessary to bring this into us? If Christianity was African, why was it the indigenous Ethiopian were forced to convert to it? Why was the indigenous Africans forced to convert to it throughout the sub-Saharan Africa? So
Can you hear me?
yes, I can hear you. I see we're cut again.
Yes. Sorry about that. Sometimes the connection does it with the StreamYard.
Yeah, well, it's technology. There's nothing much we can do about it.
Mm-hmm. So look on your screen and tell me if that's the cover of the book, The Making of
Yes,
Modern Ethiopia. Okay.
yes,
Oh, that
this
might
is the book.
that's it.
This is the book. This book, it is important um, for Africans to have it. The Making of Modern Ethiopia, 1896 to 1974, by Tishale Kudedi.
Mm-hmm.
This is a very important book for the Rastafari to read, and they need to read it objectively, not with their conspiracy theorist mindset or paranoia mind. They just need to read it objectively. And it explained a whole lot of things and it put Ethiopia into proper perspective. There is also another documentary about it. It is called Men of the Millennium.
Mm-hmm.
It came out in 2000. We have just been circulating among the Rastafari. But also, again, when you come in from this blinkers concept of Rastafari, you will miss the details. But they are interviewing men who were, some of were ministers in the government of His Majesty. One of them was like, we Ethiopians never considered ourselves to be Africans until 1963, when
Mm-hmm.
His Majesty established the Organization of African Unity and dragged us screaming and kicking into Africa. And of course, when you read that book, The Making of Modern Ethiopia, it's making the same point that all the time Ethiopian considered itself part of Israel. They even refer to their god as Israel Amlak. They are, their emblems, Lion of Judah, descendant of Solomon. So they've never considered them to be part of Africa. They always saw themselves as some superior race in Africa. And that is why for 2,000 years they were engaging in enslaving of Africans. We can celebrate King Ezana as much as we want, but King Ezana also used to sell the dark-skinned Ethiopians as slaves to the Greeks. So these were slave kingdoms. I mean, Ethiopia practiced slavery long after slavery was abolished, until 1943, to be precise.
Mm-hmm.
Long after one of the pretexts for Mussolini to invade Ethiopia during 1936 and 1934, 1936 to 1941 Italian Ethiopian War. One of the pretexts Mussolini used was that Ethiopia is practicing slavery. So they needed to civilize it and all of that. But yes, and some of the Ethiopian apologists love to say, "Oh, Ethiopian slavery was like a domestic servitude type of thing."
Mm-hmm.
No, it wasn't. It was slavery. It was slavery by all intent. It was slavery. It was dehumanizing. It was discriminative. So it was slavery. You were called a barrier, you were called a gala, you were subjected to hard labor, you were considered to be a lower class, and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So, so most people would like to apologize on behalf of Ethiopia because of this obsession we have with Ethiopia. But the reality is, Ethiopians were brutal, like their Arab cousins, and like the Europeans that they wanted to emulate all this time from the days of King Ezana.
Mm.
I mean, Ethiopians are mulattoes,
Yeah, I
and
know. I
you
know.
had this you had the same problem of mulattoes even during slavery.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's bad in America. Bad, bad,
yeah, yeah. So they form the bulk of the ruling class. They're part of the ruling class. They're part of the house slave.
hmm That's exactly how I visualized it.
Mm-hmm.
And they're still like that now.
Yeah, they're still very much like that. I mean, they have shops all over South Africa. We see how they treat their servants here.
Mm-mm.
Same way, same thing.
Yeah. That's why when white people are getting run off the land in South Africa, that makes my day. If I'm not having a
Yeah.
good day, I could see that and I'll have a good day
Mm-hmm.
because that's what's been needed a long time ago. I saw one video where he was beating the man with a belt,
Mm. Oh, definitely.
taking the
They are
man
giving
back. Get out of here.
freedom. Yes, that is why you see they ran to Donald Trump to help them.
Please. There got to be something in it for Donald Trump to help. He's not just helping. He needs attachments to something, resources, something.
Now, Donald Trump thought this group of whites who brought, he thought they were useful whites. He thought they were farmers and all of that. And then he only realized that they were just dealing with car picking. They were not the type of the white people that he wanted.
Hmm.
And, and he was disappointed. He expressed disappointment. Now we've been seeing a lot of posts on social media about these white people who wants to go back to South Africa.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
They should have been out. I'm telling you, they should have never been there in the first place. But when they started like getting that revolutionary Zulu spirit back in their blood, I was
Mm-hmm.
happy to see those, and I'm still see some every now and then. But at one point, it was an uproar to where I'm reclaiming, and they just came in with that fire, the purifying fire.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a
We need a
balance is trying to be restored, and it may seem rough to some people, but you got to be rough in order to get what you want and get your freedom and your liberation. Because if you don't, then we're gonna stay in mental chains. So it's a good thing. We just need more back. We just need more Africans. We need more people doing it. In the
mm,
diaspora, in the Caribbean, in the Americas. If we thread that needle and weave a connection, oh my goodness,
yeah.
we'll be
No,
unstoppable again.
we need to bring that spirit back. We need to get out of this one love mentality, and be objective, be realistic, because it is teaching us to love our enemy, and hate ourselves.
Hmm.
We love ourselves to the point of refusing to be slaves again. But I've heard so many non-African leaders talking about how Africa is ripe to be slaves again, that we are good to be slaves again. So they think that we're in a good position to be made slaves again, that nothing fundamentally changed about us.
And you see the common similarities that the African in America or African in the Caribbean, we all have a similar story when we speak to an African from the continent. You know,
Mm.
our stories, the common denominator, are always the same.
Yeah.
So we have to stop fighting each other because we still have the same common denominator, which is what we need to get in balance.
Mm. Because we are fighting the same system globally. White supremacy racism is a global problem. It's not only a problem in America or in Africa. It's wherever black people find themselves in.
Hmm.
That is why we unite wherever we are, because our problems are the same. There is no better of Africans. Sometimes we listen to, uh, lately there being a lot of issues in South Africa are usually characterized as xenophobia, but they are taken out of context. We have about 44 African countries here. Uh, Majority of these Africans are engaged in drug dealing, all sorts of criminality you can think about. But whenever they are confronted, they start to talk about Africa must be one, Africa must be united. And then you ask yourself, what is it that they are doing to advance Pan Africanism? You don't see, they don't set up an institute, they don't go around lecturing about Pan Africanism. There's nothing. Well, if it is Pan Africanism, it's a predatory Pan Africanism. It's very parasitic. So, as a result, it's creating socio-economic challenges. Uh, that it is creating a lot of crime, drugs. There are certain nationalities who have monopoly over certain type of crime. When you talk about drugs, the first thing that comes to your mind is Nigerians, and it's everywhere. I've been to 18 African countries. It's a problem everywhere. You know, you don't really get big institutions that you are told that, oh, this is a Pan African center built by Nigeria. I know there are strong Nigerian scholars that I read their books like Louis, Dangozi and others. But you're not getting those type of Nigerians here, warriors who are building any institution. No. The greatest institutions that they built it are two. It's the drug institution and the church institution, which is again using Christianity to rob blind the vulnerable poor Africans. And then you've got Zimbabweans have a certain monopoly over certain type of crimes, and it goes like that. And then when these issues need to be addressed, people are telling you, yeah, but Africa must unite. And then you ask, but besides these things, besides when these issues are highlighted, what are you fundamentally doing to unite Africa? Nothing. When the other debate, they tell you that, yeah, you were ruled by the white men, so what is wrong with us here? It's like they say it was okay for the white men to rule you. Now it's our turn for us to rule you also. So now you are having domestic colonization of Africa by fellow Africans who are using the same narrative. You South Africans are stupid. You were ruled by the white men. So we are having this undermine each other instead of advancing fundamental principles of Pan-African. You don't. I have never quote any African who is fundamental, who is the Pan-Africanist. There's only one of them is my friend Joshua Maponga. That's the only one I can tell you about who's going around here talking about Pan-Africanism, African spirituality, and all of that. But the rest, they are not within that category, And even if they are not involved in drugs, but they are not involved either in institution building, unity building. They are building silos. They are building islands of their own nationalities and identities. They come into small Zimbabwe, small Cameroon, small Nigeria. In South Africa, last month they crowned a Nigerian king in Eastern Cape. It caused so much problem. That how do you say you're crowning a Nigerian king here? And they had videos of they fill up the plane. We are going to South Africa now. We have you have our ego. We are going to take over that country from those stupid South Africans.
That's what they're saying?
That's what they say. There are videos that are going on. Nigerians have a very little opinion about South Africans. They say they're stupid. They don't know how to love the woman. They don't know how to make love to the woman.
What? Some nerve.
Yeah, because you see, once you get into a country, you take that country's women, or the women are welcoming to you. You start to think the men of in that country are stupid, but you don't look at it in a African welcoming sense. I mean, I'm a polygamous man. If I decided to move to the USA, I'll definitely have more than one wife in America. So, but that will not make me start to say the Africans in America are stupid, because I'm able to convince 3-4 women to be my queen. It is because it is part of my energy, it's part of my heritage, it's part of culture, part of my personality. So it is part of their personality to make money through all these illegal means. So when they are making money, they are having women running behind them, because black women everywhere love money, so they run after them. But some of them, they are caught in, you get a lot of South African women who are in jails in Brazil, in in foreign countries, in Thailand, because of their Nigerian drug mule. Their Nigerian boyfriend give them
Mhm.
drugs, and they get caught in foreign lands because they love money, and they are
Right.
told that there's no free life. So they are using them. They're using them for citizenship. You know, they marry them, and then they get South African citizenship. They leave them with children. They fly to Europe. They are using this South African citizenship to enter Europe, to enter the US, and go and commit more crime. What type of men are like that who live like that? 4 children. You leave a woman with 4 children. You jump into another country to go and commit crime. And when you are caught, you start to talk about, oh, we are all Africans. We must unite. So I've always said that the biggest part of Africa is the Congo. If we need to assemble in one country in Africa, like in this case, it's like they say we need to also assemble in South Africa in order to unite Africa. I'm like, we need to go to Congo. It's the richest part of Africa, is the largest part of Africa, is the
Mhm.
historical part of Africa. Most of Africans, we come from the Congo. That is why even in Rastafari, we talk about the Omani and all of these things. So it can be historically proven that we were once assembled in the Congo. In the Congo, you got all these different type of African
Mhm.
genotypes and the traces that we are all coming from there. You can get anyone who look like you in the Congo.
I
So if that
know it.
and that is the richest part of Africa in terms of minerals. So why can't we go there and stop the war, the civil war that is going on there, which is designed to plunder the Congo, and unite from the Congo? Why do we need to come to a country that we know that it is vulnerable? These South Africans were weakened by apartheid for years. It dwarfed their mindset. They're still having this post-apartheid traumatic disorder. And then you come and you mock them and say, yeah, the white people ruled you. We are the one country in Africa that the white people rule as longer than anyone else. And that is why we have one of the largest resistance movement, whether it is Rastafari, you have the largest Rastafari community, about 3 million Rastafari strong. Because the more you are oppressed, the more you push back. So the more you create a lot of resistance movement. That is why the largest community of speakers about African spirituality come from South Africa. Many people who are speaking about African spirituality, there's no country that have them than South Africa. Even those who come from Zimbabwe, they don't say these things in Zimbabwe. They have to come to South Africa to say them because they're under oppressive regimes in those countries. You know, you don't have great spokespersons of African spirituality in Malawi, in Zambia, in Angola. But when you come to South Africa, you get great spokespersons of African spirituality in large numbers. We have different institutions. Our Bantu Soul Society, Bakali People Kanya, Great Empire of Kemet, Kara Heritage Institute, Institute of Africology. We have a whole lot of institutions that is trying to decolonize because we were colonized the longest. We developed a high threshold of resistance, and we immersed ourselves in so much literature. We are exposed. We're exposed to the writings of whether it is Professor Jeffries from the US, Ray Higgins, James Smalls, um, those Muat Ashby, or Amos Wilson, Marimba Ani, Chris Wilson, or you talk about Franz Fanon, you talk about Amy Cesari, you talk about anyone who's spreading consciousness, Louis Farrakhan. You get people here in South Africa who are adherents of the teachings of those people because due to our long period of oppression, we've also developed a long resistance and then exposure to so much literature that has to do with the African liberation. And then, of course, the number of Africans who come here, they've been free from 1960. So they did not have any need to fight white oppression. So they are coming here as exploitative, tribal, anti-African, and then whenever they are put forced to reflect on their activities, they start to talk about, oh, we are all African. You are xenophobic. We are one. And then you're thinking, but yeah, what is it that you are doing to advance Pan Africanism? What is it that you are doing? Like you are selling drugs here. You are stealing electric cables. You are stealing cell phones. You are killing people. Our greatest reggae musician was killed by a man from Mozambique, Lucky Dube. You know, you are killing all of these people because you are undocumented. There is no way you can be traced. So you are increasing the level of crime. The only time you scream African, African, and oneness is when you are exposed and you need to be deported. I
Yeah,
mean, Marcus Garvey spoke about this thing also that my plan is not to take all Africans to Africa because some of you are useless here and you will be useless there.
and it's true.
And His Majesty Haile Selassie also, when he discussed repatriation with the delegation of the Back to Africa movement from Jamaica, he said that we need qualified Jamaicans. We need educated Jamaican. He had specific type of people he needed. And of course, he built it prison. So crime was never accepted anywhere in Africa, including in Ethiopia. So why should South Africa be exception? Right? You have human trafficking, you have prostitution, you have drug cartels, and then whenever you have to address them, they start to accuse you of xenophobia.
Hmm.
So we need to have an honest conversation with ourselves as Africans and stop hiding behind this gaslighting and emotional blackmailing and guilt tripping concepts like xenophobia. What is xenophobia? We have always been welcome. We have always lived with Africans from other parts of Africa. But it is worse. We have 44 African countries. 95% of them are engaged in criminal activity. Like you get somebody who sends you a message on WhatsApp with a picture of a Chinese woman or a white woman. It's a Nigerian scammer. They want your number. They want your account number. They're telling you about Bitcoin. They're telling you about cryptocurrency. You know, every week I'm getting those type of messages.
Yes, I get those
Behind
scams
that,
all the time.
behind that is a fellow African who wants to scam you money. You know, either they're using the Chinese, like the latest I got, this person is using the Chinese woman face. You know, and then he say, "Who are you? How much salary are you earning in South Africa?" All of this. I'm like, that is too personal. Why would you want to know my salary? No. Uh, do you know about cryptocurrency and all that? I don't do online business with people I don't know.
Exactly.
And they, and then they persist. You know what? I make you rich. I'm thinking, no, you don't know me. You can't just came from nowhere to want to make me rich. Why don't you make your cousin and your relative rich? Are you telling me that all members of your family are rich? You decided to jump and come to South Africa. You see the foreign number like this one who call me. The number is from Mexico. It's a Mexico number. This person claims to be, she's got a Chinese woman picture. She claims to be a Chinese who's in England, who's assessing people's salaries, want to come here and make a business. I say, you can Google salaries, man. I'm unemployed and unemployable. So my salary does not fit into that. Even if I tell you how much I make a month, that cannot be a true reflection of salaries of the people of South Africa because majority of them are employed, are middle class, and the working class. So I'm not in that group category of people. So if I'm telling you that I'm making this much a month, which is fluctuating because I'm self-employed, so that cannot be a true reflection. You can't use that as a measure to measure the salary level of South Africans. Go and Google. Oh, they still insist. You tell them to Google. No, they still insist because they are not trying to find information about salaries. They are trying to scam you. Trying to scam you. And it's great. You can see it's a black person from Nigeria who's trying to scam you.
Yes, I know that happens a lot. And sometimes if you want to send money to Nigeria, they ask you a whole lot of questions and asking for extra ID to make sure that you're sure you know who you're sending your money to.
Hmm.
They even sometimes will have a private investigator call you and say, "Did you authorize this transaction from your bank to Western Union or however, and you definitely have to approve it.
Yes, you have to. Otherwise, you're going to
Move
get
that.
scammed. You have to. Otherwise, you are going to get scammed. You're going to get scammed, and it is bad. I mean, when I was studying in Ethiopia in 2003,
Oh, wait a
I
minute. Winifred has a question for you. He said, I was posed with a question. Should we follow democracy in our own organization as Rasta, or should this be left to the Council of Learned Elders?
what is saying?
You hear me?
Can you repeat the question?
All right. He says, I was posed with a question. Should we follow democracy in our own organizations as Rasta, or should this be left to a council of learned elders?
Well, obviously, democracy is a Western concept, and the authors of democracy they can tell you that it can only work in a small organization and in people who share the same interest and the same ethnicity. So we have seen in Africa democracy has produced despot, tyrannical democrats, despot democrats, dictator democrats, because it's been reduced to periodic elections every 5 years. We get elections, and we know how to read the system and all of that. So if democracy is reduced to electoral system or the right to speak, those things did not begin with the Greeks. We always had a model, an African model. We should follow, as Africans, we should always follow African models of governorship or of governance. Um, and which is a problem because the majority of our leaders in Africa who were killed by the West. I think France alone killed about 23 African presidents since 1962 with Silvanus Olympias of Togo. And then you go through all these other leaders that were killed. And others were killed by the US and the CIA. Majority of those African leaders, they were not killed because they were Pan-Africanists. They were killed because they were flirting with socialism and communism, moving away from Western democracy to Eastern socialism. So they were killed for one concept of the European, of the white man. So we need to center ourselves on Africa. Our things must be African centered. Our governance must be African centered. We had an egalitarian system, an equitable way of sharing power and of listening to people. Like among the Nguni people, that would be the Zulu, the Xhosa, the Swati, the Ndebele. There is a saying that Inkosi Inkosi Ngabantu, the king is the king because of the people. You get the same thing throughout Africa. That if we put you in power, you are a dictator, but you must listen to the people. So if democracy is about listening to the people, you can find those models in African indigenous governance system. So we don't need to follow democracy within our Rastafari practice. Neither are we supposed to follow this illicit concept of democracy within Rastafari, because it's another form of religious dictatorship.
Okay, and then he also asked, or not asked, but stated, in general, are the Rastas in South Africa slowly going beyond the cultural inferiority complex?
Well, they are slowly going beyond the cultural inferiority complex, because the problem with Rasta in South Africa and in Africa is that when one side of Rastafari, they tend to Jamaican. They try to speak patois. They try to imitate Jamaican things, albeit they have a little knowledge of them, a little understanding. They just getting them through visitation of few elders, through publications like the Jihad or some Rasta writing or journals or documentaries. And then they tend to be into African, they tend to be very despotic towards each other. They tend to be very oppressive. They use the Judeo-Christian monotheism, which is based on we and them. If you're not with us, you are against us type of mentality. So, but slowly but surely they are transcending that cultural inferiority, and they are beginning to reflect on their African culture as their source of knowledge.
Okay. Yeah, and he also made a comment about the Portuguese when you spoke on the Portuguese with the slave trade.
What about the Portuguese?
And he said it was the Portuguese who saved Christianity in Ethiopia who were seeking for Prester John in the same time of Vandal, da Gama, and the destruction in the Swahili coast.
Yes. Portuguese were the first people to navigate around Africa, the likes of Bartholomew Diaz and Marco Polo and Vasco da Gama. In the coast, in the African coast, they came. The first thing they planted there was a Christian cross. They put a big monument of a Christian cross that they have conquered the land, or they are going to conquer the land using Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, it's true that during the 16th century, they were excessively searching for Protestant John in Ethiopia, and then they also infused some Catholic doctrine during the reign of Emperor Saturninus, who is the father of Emperor Fasilidos, who was later deemed to be a heretic because he converted to Catholicism. But it was the Greek who first brought Christianity to Ethiopia. A Greco-Syrian by the name of Demetrius, who went on to become the first bishop of Ethiopia. The Ethiopians, they call him Abba Salam. He's the one who converted the Ethiopian king Rama into Christianity. So Ethiopia is the first country in Africa to be colonized by religion. Even if most people like to shout and say Ethiopia was never colonized, but Ethiopia was colonized by religion.
It sounds like the colonization in Ethiopia runs deep.
It was deep and old.
You said it runs deep and cold?
It was deep and old. It's the oldest country.
Old, okay, yes, yeah. Definitely. Yeah, so I don't know if you have anything else to do. I don't want to take up the rest of your time from your family. We can always invite you back on again another time.
In our African culture, we have a phrase that the cow does not give all its dung, so we can never exhaust the reasoning.
Sure. Yeah,
We can talk.
I mean, I could talk all day.
Yeah, same here. I can talk all day, non-stop. But yeah, I have to go to my house. I'm at my mother's house, so my car to pick me up is gonna be here anytime soon. So I need to prepare the children and the empress so that we can go to the house, so we can always continue the other day.
Hmm. Right.
But it was great having conversation with you.
Say
And
that
to those
again.
who, I think it was good to hold the conversation with you.
Oh yes, definitely is an honor to have you. I've been following you for some years now, so I think it was about time. I
Yeah,
appreciate it so much.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, everything have its own time.
And I'm sure the
So
listeners, they appreciate it too.
I'm glad to hear that, and I
I
hope
see
you
they in the
appreciate it.
chat, commenting. So it's a good stream today.
Yes, no, it was great. And, we should keep this conversation.
Oh, yes. Because it never ends. It never ends.
Mm-hmm.
It never gets old. Never
Never
gets
get old. We must always talk as Africans.
hmm And
It
that's
is
a part of the
important.
healing that we need
Yes,
when we do that.
healing. Yeah, healing is not only medicinal; it's also conversational.
hmm hmm Because with everything we spoke about, we can get a lot out of that, in a positive way
So,
to move forward in life. Because it helps me too. You're always learning a new piece of history. So you talk. I want to talk to people who have that knows the history.
mm,
Because we've been getting it so messy.
yeah,
Like we live a double life. We can't even be who we want to be.
yeah, we need to move away. The double life is a cause of this double consciousness that is imposed on us.
hmm
Mm. So we need to make sure that we decolonize.
And if people start reading more, that will help with that process too. Got to get that brain moving.
That is true. That is true. No, it's okay. You let me know
Okay.
when you want us to have a conversation. So where are you based?
Hmm.
Where are you based? Are you in the US?
Yes, I'm in South Florida.
We're coming to South Florida in September.
Of 2026.
Yes, this year.
Which part of Florida?
They say I'll send you the name. Um, it's
Okay.
on. There's a pen center. Um, they once put the pamphlet there. Let me just look for it. Uh, they have those details. So there's those details. It's where is it? It will be September, of course. Uh, no, I'll look for it and get back to you with it.
Okay.
Okay, it is. They say what? They say Pen Center, St. Helena, South Carolina. Yeah, 16 Pen Center, corner CIRE, St. Helena Island.
And
Yeah,
that's in North Carolina?
they say here is written South Carolina.
Okay, that's a different state.
Mm.
That's a whole different state. That's about 20 hours, maybe, or 16.
Wow. Fine.
And well, you said there was one in Florida too, right?
No, it's South Carolina. It's not in Florida.
But South Carolina is nice as well because they have a heavy African presence with the Gullah Geechee from St. Helena's Island, and some of them speak with a patois.
Okay.
Yeah, and they plant rice and different agricultural skills that they was brought up throughout the generations. They actually are still applying it today. It's a whole community of them called the Gullah Geechee in the Gullah Islands of South Carolina.
But you will keep you updated.
Hmm.
And they will keep you updated.
Okay, no problem. I appreciate it. And enjoy the rest of your day. Bless up the family for me. Love and
Thank
gratitude.
you. And same for you too. Peace and love. Blessed love. Thanks for the conversation.
Yes, blessed love. Peace.